It's here. Hopefully it didn't start mixing last night, but obviously we have a bunch of questions to get through. We have a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead. Let's start pulling up these questions on the site. And also, I do want to be looking at the most recent injury updates that we have. And obviously, we are streaming here a little bit later because I feel like maybe most people already got their decisions done yesterday morning with all the games. But anyway, we should have actives, inactives coming out already. If you're looking at Jalen Coker, he will be active. Don't freaking care. I think you still start Adam Thielen if you got him and you're desperate. Tyrone Tracy is active for week 16 officially. David Njoku is active as well. So if you have Njoku, definitely think you can play him. Am I super excited to do so? Probably not. Realistically, passing volume is going to be down because of the change at quarterback, but you will have a really good matchup going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. So you can make an argument for it for that reason. Tony Pollard is officially active, so definitely do not start Tajee Spears. Zach Ertz is going to be able to play week 16. Zach Ertz is a viable streamer. If you needed a tight end, I'd play David Njoku over him if we could. And then going through looking at the other updates, we have Tyreek expected to play, Tony Pollard good to go, which we already discussed. And outside of that, I think it's just primarily everything from the games yesterday. But let's go ahead. Let's dive into the questions that we have on the site. And again, I really appreciate y'all coming, hanging out with us. This is a super, super big day. And I'm going to try to answer as many questions as we possibly can. But first, obviously, let's get the guaranteed answers on the site real quick. So Tony coming through with a question. Here it's a start sit. We need to choose our running backs where we have Walker as an easy play here. And really you're choosing between Stevenson, Tracy, Jerome Ford, and I guess Kondre Miller. I'm going to go ahead. I will take Ford. If you look at Ford, the benefit that you're going to get is a phenomenal matchup going up against the worst defense in the NFL. And at the same time, you have receiving usage, where with guys like Miller, you're not going to have much receiving work. And then going down to the flex, I really hope we have a receiver that we can start. Our best receiver would probably be Rome Odunze. So we're probably not starting Rome. We're looking at either Tracy, Ramondre, or Miller. Again, Miller is projected out to be in the lowest scoring offense in the league this week, and you don't have the receiving work, so I would rather avoid him if we could. Honestly, I think I may end up going ahead and taking Ramondre Stevenson. I don't love it because of the Bills being 14-point favorites here, but at the same time, I think you can do it, knowing the Bills have given up a ton of points to opposing running backs this season. Now, DK Jones coming out says, can only play 3 receivers, a tight end, and a flex option 2. Out of these players, who are we going to start? Well, we don't have a running back. Okay, so 3 receivers, a tight end, and 1 flex. So you for sure are playing A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Drake London at wide receiver. Absolute no-brainer there. A.J. Brown, Higgins, London at receiver. Johnny over Andrews. I would have told you. I guess Andrews scored the touchdown. So if you want Andrews, no harm to you. But really the only question is Rachaad White versus Cooper Kupp, right? Because you're playing A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, and Drake London at receiver. So your leftover best wide receiver options, Kupp. Definitely we've seen a very low floor. He's flopped 2 of the last 3 games. Decent little matchup going up against the Jets where you did have Brian Thomas go absolutely nuclear. We should have Puka Nacua probably commanding the majority of the attention from the opposing defense. So I don't know. For me, I would play Cooper Kupp myself over Rachaad White, where it does appear that you do have Bucky Irving as the main guy there in Tampa, but the White does give you a relatively high floor. Now, Stoop coming through says, we also have Patrick Taylor as an option. Again, what actually has scared me off of Patrick Taylor is looking at they've moved the underdog projections up with Taylor a decent amount. They're still pretty low, but when we were looking at this previously, they had Patrick Taylor like higher, lower 37.5 rushing yards. It was incredibly low. Still very low, higher, lower 52.5 total yards for Patrick Taylor. This is what's scaring me off of him, and this is why I'm actually going to be lower on him than where we initially ranked him in the flex ranks. You go look at the projections definitely being better with Ramondre Stevenson. And honestly, I'd rather go Brian Robinson here, running back, kind of regardless. If you're looking at Brian Robinson. You don't love the matchup against Philly, but with no Eckler, you should see a little more guaranteed usage, particularly as a receiver. And then going down to the flex, I guess you're mixing in Adam Thielen here as an option. Adam Thielen versus Ramondre Stevenson is going to be kind of close. Like I said, you do have Jalen Coker good to go in Carolina if that's going to make a difference for you. Here you have Adam Thielen, higher, lower, 56.5 total yards. You're definitely going to have, it says this is a non-PPR format. If it's a non-PPR format, it's easy to go Stevenson. However, if it is a full PPR league, if you wanted to go Adam Thielen instead, I'm not going to fault you on that front. But I wouldn't start Sharp. I wouldn't start Spears, given Walker and Pollard being good to go. I really think, and I honestly probably wouldn't start Patrick Taylor either, with the projections being low enough where it's not a guarantee that he ends up getting that Isaac Grindo, Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey level workload. Now, always happy to see you. This is the Soaring Eagle. Wide receiver, I'm going to go Jameson over Josh Downs. Again, we have seen 100-plus pass attempts from Jared Goff over the past 2 weeks. You have a banged-up defense, and all of a sudden the Lions are actually forced to drop back and throw the ball. And then going down to the flex, you're looking at effectively like Josh Downs, Patrick Taylor as the two main options. I'm not really considering ETN here. And I would go Laporta over a banged-up David Njoku with no Jameis Winston. Look at the projections, Downs versus Taylor. Low volume passing attack in Indianapolis, which of course is the main concern. You have Downs higher, lower, 49.5 receiving yards on Underdog. I think you maybe just go ahead and take Patrick Taylor and go, what if he does have the Isaac Grindo level workload? If he does, he probably is a great play there in the flex over Josh Downs, but obviously it's not a guarantee. Now, Steven coming through. Tight end, we're looking at Kraft versus Ferguson. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take the tight end of the better offense. I'm going to go Tucker Kraft. Only concern is you really won't have a ton of target volume in Green Bay, knowing the Packers should be able to run the ball over and over and over again here. For the flex spot, you 100% need to go Brian Thomas, and honestly, don't need to think twice about that either. For the second flex, I think we're going to go ahead and we're looking at either Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith-Njigba as the primary two options. I guess you could maybe mix in Juwan Jennings, but really those are the only receivers that would be interesting here. I have JSN as a slight concern given the weather. Let me pull up what we actually have with the updated implied team totals, which obviously will take into account what the weather looks to be in these games here and if that's still a primary concern. And as I pull this up, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this stream. Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you're ever going to hit that like button, I'd kindly ask that you do it now. Okay, so these are the implied team totals. This is not what I'm saying these offenses are going to do. This is what sportsbooks are saying what these offenses are going to do. And I'm going to be honest with you, the sportsbooks, their opinion is definitely more valid than mine. They have the highest scoring offenses in the league this week being Buffalo, the Packers, the Bengals, the Lions, the Cardinals, the Falcons. These are the offenses that you want their pieces in. The lowest scoring offenses this week project to be the Saints by a decent bit. Saints have an implied team total of 14 points. The New England Patriots, the New York Giants, and then you have a tier up to the Cincinnati Bengals. And then obviously the Steelers had very low projections here as well. But the main thing I wanted to see is how does Seattle project? So the line has moved down here where the over-under opened at 45.5 for this Seattle-Minnesota game. It's come down to 42.5. Maybe this is weather concerns that sportsbooks are pricing in. Going over to the Jets, their over-under is 47 for their game. Their implied team total is 22 points. JSN, Garrett Wilson, pretty damn close for me. If y'all could help me out in the live chat, what direction would you be going in? If you could start either Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson, or Juwan Jennings, who are you going with? JSN, Juwan Jennings, or Garrett Wilson? We got one vote, JSN. JSN, Jennings, JSN. If you look at, so the chat saying JSN, if you're looking at my rankings, that we put out yesterday, or maybe the day before, whenever it was, I had JSN ranked as the second option here behind Wilson based off weather. But if everybody in the chat saying JSN's been better than Garrett Wilson this season, I'm completely fine with you going ahead and taking Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now, Jay Franco says Neighbors or Taylor in the flex spot. So this is Patrick Taylor. This is a full PPR format as well. So I think it's a pretty easy spot to just go ahead and take Malik Neighbors and get the guaranteed target volume. Now, Nadester coming through. We need a flex between Breece, Kupp, and Harrison. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Breece Hall. Again, should be a decently high-scoring game environment. And at the same time with Breece, you're another week removed from the injury. Of course, a big concern is you just simply didn't have him playing a ton of snaps this past week with him being banged up. He played fewer than 50% of the snaps for the Jets. But you're hoping that that can go in the right direction now that he is healthier. Now, Andrew B coming through says, need 2 running backs in a flex between Robinson, Hall, Swift, or Patrick Taylor. Or flex Swift or McMillan. Hook 'em horns. Hook 'em horns, my friend. Good day to be a Texas Longhorn. Looking at this, I think it's an easy spot to tell you to take Breece Hall. Between Brian Robinson and Patrick Taylor, this is where we really need to have that conversation. Where if you're looking at Patrick Taylor, better matchup, better, I don't want to say better offense, maybe better offense this week, just because you do have a really tough spot for the Commanders going up against Philly. But I'll still go with Brian Robinson with the expectation, again, that you see a little more receiving usage than he had early in the year because you have no Eckler. And again, I want to see our favorite underdog pick'em last week was Brian Robinson have more than 4.5 receiving yards. Have they put out, okay, so Brian Robinson's up higher or lower 10.5 receiving yards. So they definitely are moving that in the right direction. And then I'm more confident with his workload than I'm going to be in terms of Patrick Taylor. And then down here for the flex, I'm either Zay Flowers or Devonta Smith. I'm really not, actually, I guess Zay Flowers has already played. Never mind, I'm an idiot. So if you didn't play Flowers, you are going to go ahead and take Smith there, my friend. Now, Team of Destiny number 2 says Pollard is in and Isaac being out. Is Patrick Taylor worthy? I would for sure play Patrick Taylor over Tajay Spears with Tony Pollard good to go. So yeah, I would go ahead. I'd play Patrick Taylor here. Wide range of outcomes. Again, if you look at the projections, you're not seeing him project out the same way that you saw from Isaac Grindo when Grindo stepped in. Where what got me on Isaac Grindo as a play last minute with his first week starting a few weeks back is literally looking at the underdog projections. They had him like higher, lower 83.5 total yards. And if you're looking at Patrick Taylor again, they have Patrick Taylor currently higher, lower 52.5 total yards. So much lower projections. But if you're comparing him to like the backup running backs such as Tajay Spears, I think you can go with them. Now, Kobo coming through says Reed is better, but Rome should have an opportunity. I'm going to go Reed. I completely understand your thought process in that, oh, the Lions defense is banged up, while at the same time, you should have a considerable amount of dropbacks for Caleb because of the spread on the game. But still, for me, it's going to be difficult to get away from the guy that we've seen the production from all season, especially when the Packers project to be the highest scoring, second highest scoring offense in the league. Zuver says Nico and Najee busted, thankfully. We need some wide receiver and flex help. Yeah, thank God I benched Najee Harris yesterday. How many points did Najee end up coming away with? I wasn't stressing too much because my matchup yesterday, we didn't have anybody going. I could have started Najee. I could have started Hollywood. He could have started Jalen Warren or Kareem Hunt. Thank God they were on his bench. I would have been so pissed if Hunt dropped 16 points against me. But yeah, Najee with the pathetic little 4.5. Easy, clear spot to avoid against. I mean, in that game environment. But happy that you got to play against him, my friend. Here, I think you just go with the high floor. I think you're going to go Garrett Wilson as well as Terry McLaurin. I mean, if you're looking at what we have with 2-point Terry, it is scary, of course, with the matchup going up against Philadelphia that absolutely shut down Terry earlier in the season. But still, at the same time, you take a step backwards. He's only had 3 games this year with fewer than 10 fantasy points. I think you lower expectations based off the tough matchup, but you still probably end up having to play him. And then going down to the flex with this being a full PPR format, I'm just going to play it safe. I'm going to go with Jawan Jennings. If you went up against Najee and Nico, I think you just kind of need a high floor at this point. And I think Jennings, based off the projected target share, should be a really safe play. Mother Flocka, always happy to see you. Here I'd go DeAndre Swift over Kondre Miller. I mean, obviously with Swift, the Lions have been a tough defense to go up against for opposing running backs this season, but the Lions defense really banged up at this point, and Swift, you had the guaranteed opportunities. And then we're definitely going to go with Sam Laporta over injured K-Dot in here. And you better believe your boy's sending up a prayer for Laporta this week. And tight end between Juwan Johnson and Britton Strange, we're going to go with Strange. If you're looking at Britton Strange this past week, I know he absolutely dominates. I don't want to tell anybody to go all in, however, because if we're going to be honest with each other, I mean, it's a spot in which if you take a step backwards and look at what he did early in the season with no Evan Ingram, it wasn't too inspiring, and it's a bad offense as well with Mac Jones under center. But the benefit that you have now in comparison earlier in the year, of course, you have no Kirk as well. You have no Gabe Davis as well. So there's just really nobody outside of Brian Thomas and Britton Strange to catch the ball. And then going down to the flex, I think here, if I had to choose somebody, I would go ahead. I'd take Patrick Taylor over these guys like Sharp and Romeo Dobbs, because Taylor, you do have the shot to lead the team in snaps and touches in that backfield, even if it's not a guarantee. Obtainable says leaning TT Jr., but backfield split is stressing me. Well, we know we play Achane. That's a no-brainer. And then going down in the flex, we have no Waddle. You're choosing either Tyrone Tracy or Patrick Taylor. I'd rather go Patrick Taylor over Tyrone Tracy. Yeah, Tracy's splitting with Singletary at the moment, and we know that the Niners offense should be much better than the Giants. I don't know exactly what the workload looks like for Patrick Taylor. But again, I don't know exactly what the workload looks like for Tracy. Now, NPS coming through, we know that Chase Brown, James Conner, absolute auto starts this week, as well as our A.J. Brown and Brian Thomas. Down here at tight end, we're going to go Jonnu over banged up Njoku with no Winston. And then down in the flex, you're really choosing between Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Tony Pollard, and Bucky Irving. If you're looking at my rankings here, I do have Garrett Wilson ranked as the top option in a full PPR format. Again, of course, you have Devontae Adams absolutely dominating in terms of the fantasy points over the past month, but the target share in this offense has actually remained very high for Garrett Wilson, primarily because the offense is extremely concentrated. You realistically only have two guys that are drawing any targets whatsoever here in New York between the combination of Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Now, Works coming through says, hopefully Ladd doesn't ruin my championship. Merry Christmas, my friend. And yeah, Ladd, disappointing week. Here, I think you have to play London. Again, going back to the implied team totals that you have at the moment. I understand maybe there's a little bit of concern with no Cousins and instead Desmond Ritter's the guy. But you still have the Falcons projected out as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sixth highest scoring offense in the league this week. You can assume that they are going to go ahead and they're probably going to run the ball a bunch as 9.5 point favorites, but I would still start London. A super concentrated offense where, and oh dear God, we have Chase Brown for the flex. So obviously you very easily start Chase Brown. And yeah, Chase Brown is the one guy that I wish I would have gone all in this year. Like hindsight being 2020, Chase Brown's the one player where it should have been obvious that, hey, this is the league winning running back. He's in one of the best offenses in the league. And at the same time, he has very little competition with an old dusty veteran in Zach Moss. And I figured that there was going to be value coming from the backfield. I wasn't low on Chase Brown. I believe we drafted him in like 10% of underdog drafts. Like we were slightly above average. We were slightly above average on Zach Moss as well. We knew we wanted pieces of the backfield, but I wasn't confident enough to take Chase Brown over Zach Moss. And that was a big mistake on my part, where I wish I would have just gone all in on Chase Brown. Like if you have Chase Brown right now, there are very few assets in fantasy football I'd rather have over him. Make sure he's in your lineup. Catsby says 12-team PPR, pick 2, Ford, Taylor, Tracy. I'm going to go with Ford and Taylor. Again, the reason we've been low on Tracy since the breakout against Pittsburgh is garbage offense where you're not getting a ton of work as a receiver. So I'd rather take Ford where it's a good matchup and should be a better offense this week, while at the same time, you'd have a really good track record of him drawing targets out of the backfield. Dizzle says, also, would you play Cincy or Atlanta's defense over the Vikings? So I do want to monitor the weather that you have in Seattle. Here again, if you go ahead and look at what sportsbooks are projecting out, they have lowered the over-under of this Minnesota game from 45.5 points down to 42.5. So should have lowered expectations in general with the points scored. So I think the Vikings DST is a completely fine option. Obviously, I mean, they've been a phenomenal DST so far this season. I do have the Atlanta Falcons ranked one spot ahead of them. However, primarily with the Falcons being 9.5-point favorites and with having the beautiful matchup. We're going to go Rico Dowdle over Jerome Ford relatively easily, where we've seen Dowdle just absolutely dominate with the 3-down workload. We're going to go Jerry Jeudy over Shakir. Judy's been a wide receiver 1 since Amari's been traded. Khalil Shakir's been the wide receiver 25 this season. So he's been a high-end wide receiver 3. He's had one game with more than 20 fantasy points. Shakir's fun, but honestly, I don't view him as a must-start guy now that you have, everybody healthy in Buffalo, where that wasn't the case previously. So I'll go ahead and I'll take Jerome Ford over Khalil Shakir as well, where if you're looking at Ford again, you have a phenomenal matchup going up against Cincy, while at the same time, you have receiving work. Now, It's Chavez says, hey, Mason, who should we put in at tight end and the flex? Okay, so looking at this tight end, I'm going to go Laporta over Brenton Strange for myself. You do have the Lions projected out to be a top 3 offense in the league in points scored. And also with the injury to Montgomery, while at the same time, you do have the banged up defense. There is the outside chance that you have more Jared Goff dropbacks. You have more pass attempts in general, similar to what we saw this past week. Probably not to the same extent, of course. And then down there in the flex between Keenan Allen, Jerome Ford, Marvin Harrison, Adam Thielen. For me, I don't know if I'm getting suckered into this Ford play. Again, I am playing against Jerome Ford to get into the championship this week. So maybe I'm just kind of hedging my bets. But I would go ahead and I would play Jerome Ford. Again, you have the receiving skill set. You have the matchup against the worst defense in the league. So I'm fine. We saw what Tajay Spears did off a limited role this past week. So I would go Jerome Ford over Keenan Allen. But can everybody do 2 things for me? 1, if you have not done so already, make sure you drop a like on this live stream. And 2, at the same time, make sure, I don't make sure, but if you could just let me know in the live chat who you would rather start between Jerome Ford and Keenan Allen to make sure I'm not losing my mind. Like if y'all could go between Jerome Ford, Keenan Allen, and Khalil Shakir, who are you picking between those 3? Ford, Keenan, Shakir. Let me make sure I'm not losing my mind telling everybody to go with Ford here, because I've been saying it a lot all week. Feel like I'm going to be saying it a lot today as well. And our mouse is dead, so RIP. So here's what we're going to do is we wait for my mouse to charge a bit before we get back to the questions on the site. I'm not going to be able to bring up your questions on the screen in the chat, but I'm looking over to the side here. So if you have any questions in the chat, where it looks like most people were on Jerome Ford with that question as well, let me know if you have any fantasy questions on the side, and I'll try to answer them as our mouse charges. Nobody says Addison or Devonta Smith. I would go with Smith over Addison. Steve says Debo, Pollard, Tracy. We got to pick 2. I'm going to go with the 2 running backs in Pollard as well as Tracy. Connor says Njoku or Strange in a full PPR format. Now that you have clarity that Njoku is going to be good to go, I know I said to a bunch of people asking yesterday that I was probably planning on going Strange. But now that we have the clarity Njoku is healthy, I think you can pivot over and take David Njoku. LJ says, who's a good kicker this week? I know nothing about kickers. This is my first year playing in a fantasy football league with a kicker since like 2017. And all I did was draft Dicker the kicker, hook 'em horns, because he was my kicker when I was at UT. So I would say Cameron Dicker, but he already played. We got Finway saying Njoku or Laporta. If you had Jameis under center, it would be David Njoku by a mile. But with no Jameis, honestly, I think it's a little bit of a tough spot. Jim says Pollard or Thielen, up to you. Braden says Pollard or Miller. A full BBR format, I'm definitely going to go ahead and take Tony Pollard over Kondre Miller, where at least with Pollard, you are getting the receiving work. So I would go ahead and not take Pollard. And now the mouse is charged enough where we can get back to the questions on the site. Des says, thanks, Mason. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, my friend. I'm here, quarterback. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Love versus Richardson's tough. Again, the Packers project to be the second highest scoring offense in the league this week, but you assume that they're going to be able to run the ball a ton here as super heavy favorites. I have them in the same tier. I probably go Jordan Love. I'm going down to running back. You have no Kamara. You have no Montgomery. So really tough spot. You take Dowdle with the guaranteed 3-down workload. Wide receiver, we take Evans with no Godwin, of course. And then going down to the 2 flex spots, we're going to take Jennings, who's been dominating the target share in San Fran. And then I'd probably go with either Harrison or Khalil Shakir for that second flex. I have Shakir ranked ahead of Harrison. If you're looking at the projections, I would be interested to see what they are, though. Shakir is higher, lower 54.5 receiving yards on Underdog. Harrison is higher, lower 53.5 receiving yards. So they are pretty much identical there. Let's move this over. Damian coming through says, win and we are in the championship. We got Miller off the waiver wire. Are we starting him over anybody here? I would go probably Myers over Ridley Metcalf with the weather in Seattle. I'm not going to go with Miller over those guys. I'm going to go Strange over Zach Ertz. Going down to the flex spots. Yeah, I'm not going to go with Miller in a full PPR format. I'd rather take the receivers that are going to see the target volume with DK Metcalf as well as Calvin Ridley. But a big thing that we want to be paying attention to, of course, will be the Seattle weather. Now, Quad Laser says, gross lineup for me and the opponent. We need the floor over the ceiling. Well, we know Brian Robinson's going to have a role here in his backfield. We know Trace is going to have the role in his. London should dominate targets in Atlanta. And then I think Shakir has given you a cap ceiling all year, but he's given you a little decent floor. And then going down to the flex, yeah, I mean, your team is toast. I mean, we could really use Godwin, Pickens, or Deebo Samuel to not be a complete bum here. I know some people may want to go ahead and take Jalen McMillan or Jalen Coker, the two guys that have been better as of late. But to be honest with you, I think I may end up. Let me make sure I'm not losing my mind. Again, one thing that's like making me say, like, I don't know if you can start Zach Charbonnet at all. Zach Charbonnet's higher, lower, 36.5 total yards. Like, this makes me think there's no way you can start Charbonnet if this is what the projections look like. Let's look at Spears. Spears is higher, lower, 7 fantasy points. Makes me think there's no way you can start Spears. Deebo, with them being on their 4th running back, we know he's a straight up bum. They're playing this game in Miami, so the weather should be fine. I think I would go Deebo Samuel over the backup running backs, and I know Coker and McMillan have looked good as of late, but I'm still not going to trust them here. Now, Texas Rash coming through says, was 2-5 at week 7, and we need a miracle. Running back 2 and flex. Well, we know Kenneth Walker is going to be the play here at running back over Ramondre, given the game environments. I mean, with Ramondre, 14-point spread. But honestly, I guess I'd probably end up going with him over Tracy. Where at least with Ramondre, we're pretty confident the workload's going to be there at the very minimum. Now, Air Max coming through with the start set says, hey, Mason, help me out. We need an early Christmas miracle. Quarterback, I'm going to go with Kyler over Tua if it's a 4-point passing touchdown league. Again, you have the Cardinals projected out, I want to say, as the 4th highest scoring offense in the league this week. Now, of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're going to run the ball consistently against the Panthers, but still. Okay. Going over to what we have at running back, Dowdle. Actually, no, I'm sorry. You got to go Jacobs and Achane. I mean, this is obviously phenomenal running back room. Going over to wide receiver, I think you can very easily play Lamb. And then Brian Thomas, London, kind of close, up to you. But fact of the matter is, when it's a full PPR format, I'm just going to play both receivers. I just think it's a completely fine spot where you know you have the safe target share. neither guy has a ton of competition. I guess maybe you make an argument that that Mooney is competition, but at the same time, Mooney gives you the goose egg this past week. Now, Frey says, full PPR, we need to Brian Thomas, Garrett Wilson, and T. Higgins. I know most people are just going to go Brian Thomas, and it's not even going to be remotely close here. But to be honest with you, I freaking love Higgins. We're going to end up playing both, right? I think you end up going with Brian Thomas and T. Higgins. But while Higgins has been up and down, still, it projects to be the best passing offense in the league. And going right back to what we were talking about previously, we want the concentrated offenses. The guys were only two guys are going to be earning targets. Now, let's go ahead and let's refresh this, see if we have any more questions on the site before we get to the questions in the chats. T-Mode coming through with the question. We need a tight end here between Hawk, Jonnu, and Njoku. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Jonnu. Jonnu's up to the tight end 4 in total fantasy points this season. And obviously, a lot of that's with him doing absolutely nothing at the beginning of the year. Whereas if you're going to look at Jonnu Smith, this tight end that didn't really start playing 50% of the snaps until week 6, yet he's been he's probably been the top 2 tight ends over the past 6 weeks. And he's not just doing it with unsustainable touchdown rates. He's getting target volume. Now, Trust Lock coming through, double check, make sure that we are good here. I guess if there was anybody on the bench that we would be wanting to get into the lineup, it would be Drake London. And to be honest with you, I would consider starting London over Jonathan Taylor. Again, full PPR format, I think that you have very safe projections with London. The Falcons offense should be a borderline top 5 offense in total points scored. That's what sportsbooks are saying. And again, I'm not that concerned with Michael Penix. This isn't a Mac Jones situation where it's like, oh, okay, well, the quarterback ahead of him got injured, so they're having to roll with him because they have no other option. No, this is a spot in which they're pivoting to Michael Penix under the assumption that he is better than Cousins at this point. Now, of course, you can say they're going to be a little bit more of a balanced offense, and the turnovers are going to make it where they can just run the ball more. But I really would consider just going through and starting London. But that's the only pivot that I would potentially make here is JT to London. If you look at my rankings, I have them about 3 spots apart, though, so it is truly going to be up to you. Now, Giddy Gritty coming out says, please give advice on which guys to use today. Running back, we have no Dobbins or Grindo. So, my friend, I don't know what waiver wire option you're looking at right now, but obviously, if you can go pick up Patrick Taylor, you're rolling with Taylor. Going over to receiver, I think at this point, you probably just have to take Malik Neighbors over Terry McLaurin with the really tough matchup that you have McLaurin going up against Philly. Tight end, I'm going to go Njoku over Dalton Kincaid now that we've been cleared that Njoku is good to go. And then Terry versus Jennings and Kupp, going to be relatively close for us. Again, Terry only had 2.9 fantasy points last time he played the Philadelphia Eagles. Currently is higher lower 60 net receiving yards on Underdog. Let's see what Jennings is at. Jennings higher lower is 61.5 receiving yards, but I think Terry's more likely to get the touchdown. I would go Terry over Jennings. But Jennings is an absolute fine play in his own right, in that you are looking at a player that's absolutely dominated from a target share perspective in San Francisco, as long as the weather's fine and the offense has been good. Now, Van Gilder's coming through. Quarterback, obviously, we're going to go Hurts. Running back, Chase Brown, James Cook, absolute must-start guys here in a full PPR format. Receiving usage plus red zone rolls. A wide receiver, we're going to be going Puka Nacua and honestly probably Higgins. Tight end, I'm going to be going with Kincaid, assuming you didn't start Frymuth. And then down here in the flex, no longer considering Judy in this range because you have no Winston. It really is going to be down between JT, JSN, and Brian Thomas. If you're looking at where I have Brian Thomas and Taylor ranked, I have them currently back to back. I have Brian Thomas ranked 1 slot higher. If it was a non-PPR format, I would want to go with JT. Full PPR format, though, I'm going to take the receiver with the volume in Thomas. Now, Nuggies boy coming through. Running back, we are looking at Ramondre Stevenson. And then down in the flex, if we were to get anybody into this lineup, it would be DJ Moore. But for me, I'm not playing DJ Moore over Lamb, London, or JSN. If you wanted to do a last, and then I would keep Darnold here at quarterback as well. Unless if you want to do a last minute check-in for yourself when we get to kickoff of that Seattle game and you want to check the weather for Seattle here, you can go ahead and you can pivot away from that game. If it looks like it's going to be horrendous, it is definitely something to monitor where the over-under of the game has fallen by about 2.5, 3 points. Now, Doug P coming through. Tight end, we're looking at Strange, Kincaid, Pat Frymuth. Between Strange and Kincaid, full PPR format, I think we can just throw in the towel and say you want to go with Strange, given the guaranteed target volume that you're going to have. Again, not only do you have no Ingram, but you also have no Christian Kirk, and you have no Gabe Davis as well. Now, Gavin coming through. Here we need 2 flex spots. We have McMillan, Patrick Taylor, Brian Robinson, Jerome Ford, Marvin Harrison. I'm going to take the running backs with the guaranteed opportunity. I'm going to go with the combo of Brian Robinson as well as Jerome Ford. Where, I mean, if you're looking at Robinson and Ford, you just have pretty much a guaranteed, I don't know, a guaranteed workload where you know exactly what you're going to expect. You're going to get 15 plus opportunities. If you're looking at what you're going to get from Ford, you're also going to have receiving usage. While it's a garbage offense, it's a great matchup against the worst defense in the league. Now we're looking at this from blank, and I'm assuming you're maybe asking us which receiver out of these 3. For me personally, I have Garrett Wilson ranked right ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Again, I know that we asked the chat this earlier and most people said JSN. If you look at the projections on Underdog, they have Garrett Wilson higher, lower, 62.5 receiving yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba higher, lower, 63.5. They have Wilson more likely to get the touchdown, however. And again, I think you can use the tiebreaker as the weather in this Seattle game. I wouldn't go Kupp over either one of these guys. I think just the floor that you've had with JSN and Wilson have been so much higher than the floor that you get with Kupp. So for me, I'd probably end up going with Wilson. But if you thought the weather was going to be fine in Seattle, you can go with JSN. Now here for Nathan, Superflex spot, I'm going to take Purdy over May. Again, obviously the weather has really impacted Brock Purdy 2 of the last 3 weeks. Going over to the running back position, I think you have to play Kenneth Walker there over those other options. I'm going to go Njoku over Kincaid now that we know he is officially good to go. And down here in the flex, I'm assuming we're going to end up going with Juwan Jennings. Yeah, looking at all the options, we're going to go with Jennings, who has just absolutely dominated the targets in San Francisco since you've had no Ayuk. Now, Rye Guy McFly says start 1, Bowers, Myers, Jennings, and DK. Okay, I would go ahead and I am always hesitant to tell you to play a tight end. Always hesitant. But here, you look at these projections for Bowers. Bowers is up higher, lower, 68.5 receiving yards. You have Aiden O'Connell good to go, so the overall passing volume should be better in Las Vegas than it otherwise was. I think we probably go forward and we just take Brock Bowers here. I mean, 2 of the last, 4 weeks? Or was it 2 of the last? I mean, I think 2 over the last 4 weeks. He had 30 points from Bowers. Perla coming out. We need a tight end and a flex. I'm going to go with Njoku over Strange now that we know Njoku's good to go. And then we're going to take Brian Thomas down in the flex with the big playability and the guaranteed targets. Rated R Savior coming through. We're going to go Darnold over Cooper Rush. I'm going to go with Deebo Samuel over Jalen McMillan. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, though. David Njoku over Britton Strange. And then down here in the flex, if we had a time machine, I'd want to play Kareem Hunt. But instead, we're just going to take Patrick Taylor. I would take Taylor over Condre Miller. With Miller, I think you have a safer floor with the the touches. But I don't think you have any usage as a receiver, and it's a garbage offense. Now, Z-Varn coming through, and we need 2 flex plays here. You have some interesting receivers between Terry, Neighbors, and Smith, and then also Rico Dowdle at running back. Those are really the only guys that I would be considering here. Honestly, I have Terry and Neighbors ranked back to back. Again, with Neighbors, you're always going to see high projections when it comes to his targets and his receiving yards, but the touchdowns may not be there. Full PPR format, I'm fine if you wanted to go with Neighbors and Dowdle, but if you were playing in a league where you were chasing a little more touchdown upside, I'd be going Terry over Neighbors. The issue, of course, with Neighbors is just the cap ceiling, knowing he's not going to have any touchdowns available to him. Now, Puka and Rally coming through. Actually, funny name. Here for the flex spot, we're choosing between Dowdle, Brees, Cup, and Metcalf. So if you knew that Brees was going to have the same workload as he did a week ago, it would be super, super, super easy to take Rico Dowdle ahead of Brees Hall. We don't know exactly what the workload's going to look like. However, I mean, maybe Brees comes through and maybe he plays 70+% of the snaps again. And if that does end up being the case, then he's probably the play over Dowdle. But with that uncertainty, with Braylon Allen being good to go, I think you just take Dowdle, who's had 20+ opportunities every week over the past month. Now, Apple coming through. We need a wide receiver between Jennings, Terry, Tyreek, Metcalf. I know a lot of people are going to hate this, but with no Waddle, I think you have to stick with Tyreek. I know he gives you the down performance this past week, but still. And then going over to the flex spot, I mean, here it's going to be tough between maybe like Kenneth Walker and some of these receivers, such as Terry McLaurin. Again, this is a full PPR format. So because it's a full PPR format and people are a little bit concerned here, specifically when it comes to what you have with the matchup for Walker plus the weather in this game, I think you can go ahead and you can probably just take Terry McLaurin despite the matchup being a really bad one. Now, Dakota coming through with a massive donor. Really appreciate you, my friend. Let me hook you up with a free start set question for next week. Hopefully you're in the championship next week. But anyway, here we need two flex spots between Dowdle, Brian Robinson, Jennings. It's a full PPR format. So for that reason, I think I probably end up taking Jennings over Brian Robinson. I feel like we can kind of go back and forth with this, because if you are looking at what we have with, say, I don't know, Brian Robinson, you know you have the guaranteed touches. You have the expanded role as a receiver now that you have no Eckler. But main reason we may not be going in this direction is because the matchup specifically against Philly for Brian Robinson. Now, Lornad coming out says Tyreek, Harrison, or Adam Thielen. Here, it's very, very easily going to be Tyreek Hill for me. Completely understand. Yes, he was disappointing this past week, and he hasn't been the guy that you drafted him to be. But still, at the same time, this situation in which you're looking at a receiver that gave you the 28 points 2 weeks back, gave you the 20-point week 3 weeks back. When you've had Tua, he has been averaging over 15 fantasy points a game, and you have no Jalen Waddle as well. Now, Hellboy Jordan coming out says, Merry Xmas, my friend. Send up a prayer, make it through to the Super Bowl this next week. Hope you do too. Really appreciate you, my friend, and excited to check this out. Here, running back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Brees. And honestly, between White, Taylor, Miller, it's not the easiest call in the world. If you'd have asked me early in the week, I would have for sure gone ahead and taken Patrick Taylor over Rashad White. Just to be completely honest with you, what's scaring me off this is if you just go look at the underdog projections, they have White for more yards. They have White more likely to score a touchdown. We know White's going to have the receiving usage as well. They have Rashad White higher, lower, 11.05 points. Whereas you go ahead and you look at Patrick Taylor's projection is down at 8.25. So honestly, I think you probably end up going with Rashad White. Miller, I'm not too interested in. Touchdown or bust, running back in a bad offense. Wide receiver, A.J. Brown, DJ Moore are the easy answers here. And then going down in the flex, not a super easy call between Adam Thielen, Patrick Taylor, and Miller. I personally would probably go with Taylor. But if you wanted to pivot over to Adam Thielen, I'm not going to fault you for it whatsoever. Now, Slippy Slides coming through. Wide receiver, we're going to go Tyreek Hill as well as Garrett Wilson here relatively easily based off the top matchup with Terry. I'm going to go Jonnu Smith at tight end. Down in the flex, I think you end up going with Kenneth Walker and Terry McLaurin. If you wanted to pivot to somebody else outside of Walker and Terry, who both have relatively bad matchups this week, Juwan Jennings would be the next best available player here for your flex. But I would go Walker and Terry personally. Now, Trev Dort coming out with our next question. It says, for the championship, thank you, King Mason. Merry Christmas, my friend. Here looking at this tight end, I would go with Hawkinson probably over Laporta. Absolutely hate to say it. And honestly, I really, really am hoping that I am wrong with this. But still, at the same time, you can say at least with TJ Hawkinson that we haven't had as many disappointing weeks as what we've had with Laporta. And then down in the flex spots, I think in a full PPR format, it's probably easy to take the receivers. For me, I would go with Higgins and London. I know that you have seen Higgins be a little bit up and down. But I mean, if you're looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba, bad weather, Higgins and London should have the safe target shares in offenses in which they do project to be top 5 options in the NFL. Now, Stub Eben coming through with our next one. This is a spot where we need help with the flex. We have Tracy, Madison, Rome, Downs as really the only options we can go with. Full PPR format, I really think you can consider Josh Downs. One of the issues that you have is you've actually had Michael Pittman earning more targets. And obviously it's a low volume passing attack in general. And you actually have them going up against Tennessee, where this is one of the few games the Colts are going to be favored in. And the Colts presumably can actually run the ball a considerable amount. So with that in mind, I may end up going Tracy. Y'all know I'm not a big Tracy guy, not a massive role as a receiver. Not only that, but at the same time, you're in a spot in which you're in a garbage offense. So you're kind of touchdown or bust in a spot where there won't be too many touchdowns available. Now, Corey Dewey coming out with our next question. We need a flex. And honestly, it's either going to be Chase Brown or Josh Jacobs. Full BBR format, Chase Brown has the larger role as the receiver. Both options are great plays this week, where both are extremely heavily favored in their contest. So you could see both offenses really leaning on the run. It's absolutely crazy that you'd have to bench Josh Jacobs, where Jacobs presumably is a top 10 flex option easily this week. But with that being said, you have the RB1, RB2, and like RB4 in my rankings. So it's crazy, but I think I play Chase Brown over Josh Jacobs. DeBear says Mixon let us down and now we're stressing. All right, so I'm assuming we just need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex here. So we played Mixon, Connor. We have James Cook down in the flex. We're leaving that as is. Wide receiver, I'm going to be going with Lamb and probably between DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, it's a little bit tougher. You do have David Njoku. Sorry, DJ Moore and Jerry Jeudy. You have David Njoku good to go. I mean, I had Jerry Jeudy ranked 2 slots ahead of DJ Moore before the David Njoku news. Now I think you can make an argument to flip them potentially. They have Jerry Jeudy higher or lower, 11.05 fantasy points on Underdog. Looking at DJ Moore, on the other hand, they have DJ Moore higher or lower, 10.55. And again, I ranked Jerry Jeudy ahead of DJ Moore anyway this week. Issue is low volume passing attack, of course, but it is a spot in which you're going up against the worst defense in the NFL. So I don't know. I think you can go ahead, play CeeDee Lamb, play Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver, and then leave the running backs in the flex as is. Now, King says, my opponent has Burrow, considering Gesicki in case Burrow scores. Oh, no. Do not do that. You're way overthinking it. The only scenario in which you go ahead and you go to try to block your opponent like that is if it's the Monday night game and you know, okay, I'm up by 30 and I just got to make sure that they don't have a miracle happen. But if we're just going into the week here, you take the highest median projection, and the highest median projection is going to be David Njoku in this instance. Okay. Now, our next question is from Big Route. Always happy to see you. Here in a full PPR, we have Taylor, Ridley, Jameson, Keenan, Ramadre, and Tracy. Pick 2. We need some upside. I'm definitely going to go with Taylor. Again, you have 100% of the opportunities in your backfield. Not only do you have 100% of the opportunities in your backfield, but at the same time, you're in a spot in which the Colts are favored. So we can kind of assume that they are going to be able to run the ball here a bit. So I go Taylor for sure. And then the other spot is going to be a little bit tougher in a full PPR format. Again, Jameson Williams may be a little bit more appealing at this point, considering the fact that you do have to see some pass attempts from this offense now in Detroit, considering the injuries to the defensive side of the ball that they have. So I think you could consider Jameson. Keenan Allen is actually on a roll with touchdowns as of late. Ramondre Stevenson, yeah, the guaranteed touches, but they are 14-point dogs. Tracy, bad offense. I'm going to go Taylor, and then I guess Ridley, you have guaranteed target volume, but you're in a bad offense as well. I have Ridley, Jameson, Keenan ranked 55, 56, 57 in my flex rankings this week. I literally have them all back to back to back. Ridley, I lower 60.5 receiving yards. Jameson, 45.5, but Jameson more likely to get the big play touchdown. Keenan, 54.5. So I have Ridley ranked, like I said, 55. 1 spot ahead of Jameson, 2 spots ahead of Keenan. I probably end up going with the receiver here as opposed to the running back in a full PPR format. So I probably end up going with Calvin Ridley, but obviously don't feel super good about it. Now let's move this over to our next few questions. And you know what I'm going to have to do real quick? I'm going to turn off the questions on the site. Maybe we end up turning them back on at one point, but I need to make sure that we're going to be able to get through all the questions. And y'all know, worst case scenario, someone pays for a question and I can't answer it on time. So I'm going to turn off all the questions on the site, and then maybe we can turn them back on later, or maybe we can just answer the questions in the chat once we get these done. But yeah, so should have no more new questions on the site. And now, Afbell coming through says Patrick Taylor or Kondre Miller. I'm going to go ahead. I will take Taylor over Miller. Again, I think you do have a more of a guaranteed role when it comes to what you're going to be getting with Miller. I'm pretty damn confident we know what that workload looks like. Whereas when you're looking at Patrick Taylor, it is going to be a lot more up in the air. But at least with Taylor, you're in the better offense. With Miller, touchdown or bust running back in what projects to be the worst offense in the NFL this week. And they are 13-point dogs. So I don't know. I think you have to go ahead and I think you have to bench Miller almost in any circumstance. At least I would. Now, Buffalo says also Bengals or Falcons DST. I'm going to go ahead and take the Falcons DST here. I mean, they are sitting at 9.5-point favorites. Obviously, they had a great game against the Raiders this past week. Still don't think that they're a phenomenal defense, but just they're going up against one of the worst offenses in the entire league with the Giants. Now, looking at BG Renat, says Brian Thomas, Jacoby Myers, or Bucky for the flex. I'm going to go ahead and take Brian Thomas. Again, if you actually look at the projections that you have for the Jags offense, you saw the same thing last week as you see this week. They actually project to be much better than like the true worst offenses in the league. Like they project to score a lot more points than what you have with like the Pats, the Giants, and the Saints this week. And then Brian Thomas, definitely the most talented player on this list and should have a really high target share considering the fact that there's nobody left in Jacksonville. Now, Mother Flocka coming through. Tight ends, we are choosing between Kincaid, Hawk. I'm going to go ahead and take Hawkinson. And then down there in the flex between Taylor, Reed, Jameson, Hopkins, Ridley. I do think it's very close. Again, Taylor is just so hard to know what to expect. I think you do have a very wide range of outcomes here. Can y'all please spam the chat? Who would you go with between Taylor, Jameson, Ridley? Patrick, Taylor, Jameson, or Ridley? I would go Ridley over Jameson, but it's close. Patrick Taylor between the two is very difficult to figure out. Also, while you're going down there, letting me know that in the chat. If you have not done so already, please hit that like button. Okay. We got Ridley, Taylor. Jameson, Ridley. Looks like most people are in on Ridley. I had Ridley ranked behind Patrick Taylor in the flex rankings this week. But again, I want to be honest with y'all for the 1,000th time. This is what's scaring me off of Patrick Taylor. And this is what's making me think that Patrick Taylor is not a safe start. Higher, lower, 55.5 total yards on Underdog. Seems like this keeps going up, but still. Very, very low projection for a running back that you want to assume has a job. Like, this is a projection where they're saying we have no idea if Taylor's even the guy. So if you wanted to go Ridley, I'm not going to fault you for it. Now, McCoy's Minute says PPR flex, Njoku, Shakir, Miller, Smith, or Ford. It's either going to be Smith or Ford for me here. Again, with Ford, you do have the safe role, good matchup. I mean, pretty much best matchup you can ask for. Smith projections are very low. I have Smith higher than Ford in our rankings by 2 spots. But if you're looking at the projections, Ford's more likely to score a touchdown, higher mark when it comes to his total yards. Of course, you're going to assume that you get more receptions with Devonta Smith. I would go Smith if it's a full PPR format, but Ford has higher projections. Now, Michael says, unsure on Metcalf. Are DK, Calvin, or Adams? Or Adam Thielen. If the weather's not that bad, I would go ahead and take DK Metcalf. Again, obviously, it will be something to monitor. You've seen the over-under of this game actually get lowered by 2.5 points. So it does seem like sportsbooks are pricing in that you're going to have bad weather. On Underdog, Metcalf's higher, lower, 65.5 receiving yards. So you are in a situation in which you have decent projections with Metcalf. And a big part of that is, of course, you do have really I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. You have a lot of points against the Minnesota Vikings defense so far this season for opposing wide receivers, is you have a lot of teams having to just go up in garbage time and you get a bunch of points at the end of the game. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for here with Metcalf. Now, looking at what we have from Lil Godan, says, I need to figure out my quarterback because Stafford's game is in snow now, I think. I'm also considering Watson and Coker for the flex. Again, I want to reiterate, if you look at these implied team totals and these over-unders, it's really going to help you figure out the weather. Like, that's how we really avoided all the Niners back against the Bills game a couple weeks ago, because we were going, not that I was a weather man and not that I was going to go ahead and tell you everything you needed to know in terms of how exactly the weather was going to be bad. But if you just go through and you look at the updated implied team totals and you look at the over-unders of these games, the over-under of this game for the Rams is at 47.5 points. It currently projects to be the 3rd highest scoring game of the week. I guess a lot of these games are projected at 47.5. So I'm not super concerned with Stafford. If you wanted to pivot over to Michael Penix, you do you, but I would start Stafford, to be honest with you. And then between Watson and Coker for the flex, I personally would go with Christian Watson. I think you just have a much better offense, but obviously Watson, both are low floor players. Coker dominated last week, but it wasn't with a ton of target volume. Now, J-Dog coming out. Running back, I am playing DeAndre Swift, and my opponent this week has Jerome Ford, so trust me, I really am hoping I'm wrong here, but I would rather have Ford, better matchup, and at the same time, possibly the same workload. Going over to the receivers, Tyreek Hill, must start guy regardless. Kupp, DJ Moore, Addison. I would go Kupp, even if Kupp's been very disappointing. And then down here for that flex spot, DJ Moore versus Jordan Addison will be relatively close. Again, you'd have a good matchup for DJ Moore going up against the Lions. And with possibly Addison, you having the concern of the weather at this point, I think it's enough of a reason for you to go ahead and pivot over to DJ Moore. Now, Turd Burglar says, full PPR, Pacheco hurt me, so upside is needed. I think you definitely go ahead and take Brian Robinson in that instance at running back, despite it being a tough matchup. And then we're going to go with the receivers if we are chasing upside with the combo of Khalil Shakir and Calvin Ridley in a full PPR format. Now, Tax says, losing right now 49-51. He has Barkley, Stevenson, Chase, and Njoku. San Fran, Aubrey left. We are chasing the upside. So, yeah, I mean, if you started Henry and Mixon, definitely a frustrating day for you yesterday. I mean, especially knowing exactly how good of a real life day you had from Henry, and he didn't really translate that to fantasy. I think I would go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mike Evans, and then JSN if the weather looks like it's not going to be horrendous. But if you're really concerned about the weather, I think you pivot over to Malik Neighbors. But regardless, you're going to go with 3 receivers there. Migros says, JSN or Rico, don't think it matters. I mean, yeah, you have an insane team. And when your team is this good, I'm completely fine just saying, let's go ahead and let's take Rico Dowdle. Get the running back that has the 3-down workload. Not only the running back that has the 3-down workload, but also decent little game environment where we go back over and we look at the highest scoring games in the league this week. You actually do have the Cowboys, Bucks tied with the Lions, Bears as what projects to be the highest scoring games for week 15. Now, Arv says, stuck at the flex. I saw you like Ford. I have weird feelings about Rome and McMillan. What do you think? For me, I think you just have a much higher floor with Jerome Ford than McMillan and Rome. And again, I completely understand where you're coming from. McMillan's been great, and this is a game environment in which you actually do have a ton of points projected for this Bucks offense. But realistically, if you go ahead and you look at the projections for Jalen McMillan, the dude's higher or lower 38.5 total yards. Rome Odunze, a great matchup against Detroit. You can see them having to throw the ball a ton. Realistically, Rome Odunze is higher or lower 38.5 total yards. The projections with these secondary receivers that could randomly pop off are just going to be so much lower than the running back that you know has the guaranteed workload. I think you could see a really big week from either McMillan or Rome. I think both of them have a very high ceiling, but I'd make the argument that Ford has a comparable ceiling. And not only does Ford have a comparable ceiling, but at the same time, I think you have a much higher floor. So I would go ahead and take Jerome Ford. Now, Hazy coming out says, Dodd, Father, bless me, please. Projected to lose by 10, full PBR, pick 2. Tracy, Miller, ETN, Patrick Taylor, Watson. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, my friend. And let me hook you up with a free start set question. Really hoping we can win this week. We could see you next week. Here, for me, I think I would go ahead and I would take Tracy and Patrick Taylor. Again, if you're going to be looking at what we have specifically when it comes to, I don't know, Miller, this is a running back in which he's a touchdown or bust option in one of the worst offenses in the league. What projects to actually be the worst offense in the league this week? At least with Patrick Taylor, while we don't necessarily know exactly what the workload's going to look like, I think he's a better receiver, honestly. I'm not saying he's a great receiver, but I think he's a better receiver than Miller. And I think his offense has way more points available in it. So I would go ahead and I honestly would take Patrick Taylor here. Now, K Brown says Tracy or Patrick Taylor. So Tracy, you know you're in a garbage offense. You're pretty confident with the workload you're going to get, but also Tracy doesn't have a massive role as a receiver. I think Taylor's more likely to get the touchdown. Honestly, I would go Patrick Taylor over Tyrone Tracy. Again, we definitely don't want to be playing either of these guys if we could avoid it, and I'm definitely going to be playing DJ Moore down there in the flex how you already have it. But yeah, if you had to choose one between Taylor and Tracy, I'd probably swing for the fences and hope that Taylor does end up being the guy for the Giants. Okay, let's move this over. Bobby Baloney. Down in the flex spot, we have Ford with the guaranteed opportunity plus the perfect matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. So honestly, I think it's kind of an easier spot for me to tell you to go ahead and take Jerome Ford. I mean, you saw Spears just come through and have a really big week based off only what he was able to do as a receiver. And here with Ford, not only do you get that receiving usage, but again, you have that same matchup that Spears had against the worst defense in the league. Now, catcher Alex coming out. Tight end, we have David Njoku versus TJ Hawkinson. I would go ahead. I would take Njoku for sure if you knew he was fully healthy. Njoku for sure if you had Jameis Winston. But here, it's definitely going to be a much tougher spot. I wonder what they put the Njoku projection at. David Njoku, they don't have right now. Maybe I need to refresh it. Because obviously Njoku didn't get cleared until about an hour and 10 minutes ago. David Njoku, they have it higher, lower, 35 and out receiving yards. Yeah, this is what I was saying. Like, the passing volume is not going to be great here, and he is banged up. I have Hawkinson ranked higher than Njoku in my ranks this week. I think we leave it as is, to be honest. Now, Chris Mars coming through. We need, I'm assuming maybe just one flex option here. You only filled out one running back. So say you needed 2 running backs and 1 flex. I think you go Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and then you go Jerome Ford in the flex. If you needed only 1 running back, 1 flex spot, I think you go Breece Hall, and then Kenneth Walker. But I think how you rank these flex plays, you go Walker, Ford, Smith, and then Josh Downs. Now, John coming out, we need a running back between Taylor, Walker. I'm going to go Taylor. Walker, tough matchup. Taylor, you are favored in your game. Going down to the flex, I would go T. Higgins over Malik Neighbors. Neighbors is the safer target floor, but Higgins is much more touchdown upside and a much better offense. Now, DK says, leaning towards Allen, did well against Detroit last game. Am I crazy for liking him over these two? So 100% Keenan Allen is in a spot in which, yeah, he's been great over the past 3 weeks, while at the same time, it's a really good game environment in which you have the Lions defense banged up. And at the same time, we can assume that you actually do have a considerable amount of, I don't know, pass attempts for Chicago where they're having to play keep up with the Detroit Lions. But I probably still stick with Cooper Kupp, to be honest with you. Kupp's given you 2 duds over the past 3 weeks, so I completely understand wanting to get away from him here. But it's still a very concentrated offense with Los Angeles. It's a game environment that has a very high total as well. So it's not an easy call by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to go ahead. I will take Kupp. Now, John coming through with a start set. Here, we need 2 flex spots. I think they're obviously, I would have played Cortland Sutton over these guys. But if you didn't play Sutton earlier in the week, I think you go with Jennings and DK Metcalf. A super safe target volume with Jennings, DK Metcalf, a matchup against the Vikings where they've allowed a ton of points to opposing wide receivers. Cameron says, who should start in that flex spot? Looking at this, White, Pollard, Keenan, Harrison, and Njoku. I probably want to go ahead and take Tony Pollard. Can we see what the projections are here? Pollard, higher, lower, 77.5 total yards. It's a spread that's extremely close with the Indianapolis Colts. We've seen running backs have big weeks against the Colts this season. You will have a receiving role. So I think we probably go ahead and honestly take Tony Pollard. Let's go Pollard. Now let me refresh this real quick. We have 2 more questions and we'll get to the questions in the live chat. VZ says, playing the number 1 seed, projected win by 20, not sure between Purdy, Drake May, and Jonnu Smith-Jones. I would go Purdy over, actually, if you had Baker, I'm going to go Baker for sure. If you have Baker, you go Baker. If it's between Purdy, May, you go Purdy. And then going down here for the flex, maybe it's a super flex spot. I mean, if you have a super flex league, then we're going to be going with Baker and Brock Purdy. And then going down to the 2 flex spots, you were saying between Jonnu and Jones. You definitely go Aaron Jones over Jonnu Smith. I know Jonnu's been incredible, but you definitely want the running back with the 3-down workload in the game environment in which they are favored. And yeah, if you had a second flex spot, I'd go Bucky Irving as well. I'd go Aaron Jones and Bucky. Now, Damien says, should we start Njoku or Britton Strange? The DTR situation is scary. Again, I've gone back and forth all week with this. David Njoku is currently sitting higher, lower 35.5 receiving yards. Strange is higher, lower 37.5 receiving yards, so it's very close. Now that Njoku is cleared and good to go, I would probably take David Njoku. I agree with you in that the quarterback situation is very, very scary here in Cleveland, and that's why it's not an easy call. If you had Jameis Winston, this wouldn't even be a question. But with that being said, I mean, you do still have a phenomenal matchup going up against the worst defense in the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think you still consider David Njoku there, to be honest. But let me move this over and answer some of the questions that we have in the live chat. Do we want to turn questions on the site? I'll turn on super chats on the site real quick, just in case anybody wanted to get a guaranteed thing in real quick. Super chat questions to me should be on the site, but we'll answer a bunch of the questions in the chat first. Let's see. Bucky or Cook? I'm going to go with James Cook over Bucky Irving. 14-point favorite here for the Buffalo Bills. Presumably, they should be able to run the ball consistently. We got Pollard, White, or Patrick Taylor. I would go ahead and I probably would take Tony Pollard. Again, close spread on this game. I'm more confident with the Taylor workload. I'm sorry, more confident with the Pollard workload than the Taylor one. 44 MSU. Always happy to see a Debo or Malik Washington. Debo's been an absolute bum. There is no denying that. But there is no way in hell you could go through and you could start Malik Washington over him before we ever see Malik Washington. Malik Washington's higher, lower 28.5 receiving yards on Underdog at the moment. If you think Malik Washington's going to crush with no Waddle, you go take the higher than 28.5 receiving yards. But if you look at actually where Debo is with these projections, Debo's higher, lower 60.5 total yards. So if you think Debo's going to be a bum, you can go lower than 60.5 total with Debo and higher than 28.5 with Washington. But for your starting lineup, for the love of God, make sure you're playing Debo Samuel over Malik Washington. We got Charbonnet or Alexander Madison in a half PPR format. This is what's scaring me off of not being able to play Charbonnet. Charbonnet currently on Underdogs, higher, lower 36.5 total yards. Whereas Madison is higher, lower 58.5. Madison's more likely to get the touchdown as well. You have I don't know. You have a spot where Walker isn't banged up in any way. He's completely off the injury report. I probably don't want to play Charbonnet if we can avoid it. Nick says Tua or Geno. I think we go with Tua over Geno. Okay. GC says May, Darnold, Caleb. Opponent is Jefferson. It's raining in Seattle. It's really cold in Buffalo. It being cold has zero impact, by the way. The only weather that has impact is winds and heavy precipitation. Never think like, oh, the temperature's going to impact this. Unless it's like obviously the extremes. Or unless you have a large sample where we can see, oh, okay, we're pretty confident that Tua is not great in cold weather. For me, as long as the weather doesn't get too bad here in Minnesota, I'm going to probably stick by Darnold. I'm sorry, in Seattle, not Minnesota. Like we can go ahead and we can again pull up the over-under and the implied team totals with these games and try to get a sense of what the weather looks like on that front. But I mean, if you're looking at this, yeah, Buffalo is still projected to be the highest scoring offense in the league, right? So I'm not worried about it being too cold there by any means. Going and looking at how the lines moved for Minnesota. Minnesota opened up with an implied team total of 24 points. That's fallen down to 22.5. The over-under has fallen from 45.5 down to 42.5. So I think the weather is going to be a concern here. Again, it's not so much of a concern like we saw a couple weeks ago with the Niners going up against Buffalo in the snow, saying like, oh, okay, looking at this data, 0% chance you can start any Niners receivers or Brock Purdy. But yeah, what was the other weather you were concerned with? Really just the Seattle one, which I'm not saying it's not a concern. The over-under's fallen here, but still, I don't think it's the end of the world. Okay, let's move this over. I see we have one more start sit question that came in on the site. Also, Evil K says Love or Purdy. Honestly, up to you. I'm starting Purdy myself, so I kind of hope it's Purdy. And I need to maybe check in on my team one last time to make sure that I'm good to go. Clint, always happy to see you. If y'all don't know, Clint is a long time member of the flock. Here, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take Brees Hall, running back, my guy. Wide receiver, I think we go with Puka Nacua. And then if you have a flex, I'm going to be going with CeeDee Lamb over Brian Thomas. But yeah, if you have a flex, I think we go Lamb. The next best flex options are Lamb, Brian Thomas, and then probably Miller. I really don't want to start Miller, though. Let's refresh this. Now, Joe Felix says start Tracy, Condre, Patrick Taylor, or Jerome Ford at RB2. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Jerome Ford. Again, with Ford, I just think you have the safe receiving role. Not only do you have a safe receiving role, but at the same time, you have a phenomenal matchup against Cincy. Mr. Philly Wub says Patrick Taylor or Miller. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Taylor and roll the dice that he's the guy. But by no means is it a guarantee here, of course, where you are looking at a situation in which the projections are extremely low on Taylor. But Miller, you have no receiving work. Not only do you have no receiving work, but at the same time, you're looking at a spot in which it's supposed to be the lowest scoring offense in the league. Now, Jerome says Zach Ertz or Brenton Strange. With Ertz, not only was he dealing with the concussion, but he also had the shoulder. So for that reason, I probably end up going ahead and just taking Strange, where he is the only guy left standing here in Jacksonville outside of Brian Thomas. And real quick, let me... Yaya says Cup or Ford, happy BR. I would go Cup myself. Let me get some like bold statements out. I mean, we've honestly hit with these in a big time way over the past few weeks. I want to reiterate just the simple things that I feel like we've gotten asked a bunch and where I stand on them. And hopefully this helps everybody in the stream. 1, Patrick Taylor is not a guaranteed 3-down workhorse at the moment. Patrick Taylor is obviously a desperation play. If you needed to grab somebody off the waiver wire, if you had Montgomery, if you had Kamara, and you needed to go somebody, you can take Patrick Taylor. But he's higher lower 55.5 total yards on Underdog. He's higher lower 11.5 rush attempts. He's not guaranteed to be the guy by any stretch of the imagination. 2, the second thing I want to address is the other waiver wire pickup with Condre Miller, whatever you want to call him. The volume is pretty safe. He's higher lower 13.5 rushing attempts. But the issue is the receiving workload through his NFL career hasn't been great. It wasn't great at TCU either. And at the same time, he projects to be in the worst offense in the NFL this week. So Miller is also a player that I personally would look to avoid. However, in a full PPR format, I think the superior waiver wire pickup, where if you have him, I am more interested in playing him, will be Jerome Ford, where Ford, we've seen the receiving usage through his NFL career. His offense projects to be much better than the Saints this week, according to sportsbooks, and you have a good matchup going up against the worst defense in the NFL. And let me see if there are any other questions that I know a bunch of people have asked over and over again. 1, if you have Tyreek Hill, you start Tyreek Hill. Do not overthink it. Yes, you're going to have some up and down performances, but if you have him, he's in your lineup. And that's that. Similar to what we said with A.J. Brown last week. 2, I know a lot of people are concerned about Terry McLaurin given the matchup. Last time he played the Eagles, he dropped 2.9 fantasy points. More likely than not, unless you have a goated team, you are going to go ahead and you are going to start Terry McLaurin. Of course, if you're playing in a super shallow format, that's not a guarantee. But I think those are maybe the majority of the questions we've had. And let me answer a couple of these real quick. Lobo says, happy holidays, Mason. Tragically left Mixon in the flex. We also have Strange as a tight end option as well. I would probably go Strange over Kraft if it's actually, this is a non-PPR format, you go Kraft. Full PPR league, you go Strange. And then here at receiver, you have to play Mike Evans for sure. I think your number 1 receiver is Evans. Your number 2 receiver is Malik Neighbors. Now, Plant Daddy coming out here, running back. We are looking at Miller, Spears, Benson. I definitely go Miller over. Don't play Spears. Another big thing I need to tell everybody here is, for the love of God, do not play Tajay Spears. I know he was good last week, but probably good to go this week. I think you have a very low floor. And then down here in the flex, I'm going to go Jerry Jeudy as well, even with lowered expectations with no Jameis. And then Rod the Planter says, looking for a ceiling play in the flex. In the flex, it's either going to be Brees or Dowdle. If you knew that Brees was going to see 70+% of the snaps and opportunities, it would be Brees relatively easily. I think Dowdle gives you a higher floor because we know Dowdle's fully healthy and you've had 4 straight weeks of 20+ opportunities. Last week, Brees played fewer than 50% of the snaps. For that reason, if you're looking at my rankings at the moment, I do have Brees ranked slightly behind Rico Dowdle. However, if you were telling me, Mason, the only thing I care about, ceiling, I would probably go ahead and take Brees in a full PPR format. But again, most people, I would recommend you go Dowdle ahead of Brees, given the security that you have with his volume. Okay. Carlos says, can Tyreek be trusted after saying time for me? Yes. If you have Tyreek, you start Tyreek. Again, I'm going to reiterate. If you have Tyreek, you start Tyreek. If you think Tyreek's going to be a bum, feel free to run over to Underdog and take Tyreek to have fewer than 72.5 total yards. But you have no Waddle. You have a decent game environment against San Fran. You start Tyreek. But it looks like we got 2 minutes till kickoff. Let me pull up my matchup to make sure that we have everything correct in it myself. And here's one thing I need to ask y'all. Are we going to go Purdy or Matthew Stafford? Let me look this up on Underdog real quick. Brock Purdy is currently higher, lower, 17.35 fantasy points. Stafford is higher, lower, 16.75 fantasy points. So Underdog, you agrees with me, Purdy over Stafford. What about Penix? Penix is the other option that I would have to go with. Penix is higher, lower, 16.5. So yeah. They have Purdy as the best option. I'm going to go Purdy there. What other decisions did I have to make? I had to decide before the games yesterday if I was going to be starting Najee Harris or if I was going to start DeAndre Swift and Ramondre Stevenson. I decided to bench Najee for the other running backs. That play is looking good. I guess I have to consider between Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. For me, it's not close. I'm going to be going with Laporta over Kincaid and see what Underdog has real quick. Kincaid has 35.5 receiving yards, higher, lower, whereas Laporta is currently higher, lower, 43.5. Come on, Laporta, I need a big week here, buddy. So those are my decisions. That's what I'm rolling with, but really appreciate you. Really wishing you the best of luck, of course. And yeah, really hope that you are able to take it down today and we can see you out in the live streams next week.